You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome back to the LA Football Show. If you're on radio, welcome back from the break. This is the LA Football Show on the mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. This is your Trojan Huddle. Going to be talking all things Trojans for the next 20 minutes or so. We did a live reaction after that brutal Cotton Bowl loss, so we'll still touch on some notes from that conversation, but we'll have more of a big picture now that the dust has settled a little bit. We're a few days removed from that, but happy to have you all with us. Show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. You got the natty left if you're a college fan listening. So you still got TCU against Georgia at SoFi. You can bet on that game, or obviously full NFL still for 1 week and then the playoffs. So plenty to bet on at betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. My man, my co-host Jamal, what's up? How we doing? I know we obviously discussed this game for 45 minutes or so. Live reaction, raw disappointment. But now that the few days have gone by, obviously still disappointed, but how are you feeling? Are you feeling any different or the exact same as we felt after the 1 point loss?
Ryan, a couple things. First is it's just sort of remarkable the mirror images that the two hated rivals of college football in LA, how similar they are in terms of feel and composition right now. Two prolific offenses, two atrocious defenses, two teams that really ended the season in a collapse-like fashion. UCLA losing 3 of their final 4, SC losing 2 straight. And I think SC personnel-wise is just sort of a better version of UCLA right now, but not by a whole heck of a lot. And I think that difference is, one Caleb Williams. But I just before we jump into this, I think it's remarkable. I've never really experienced this rivalry where both teams are so similar to one another in terms of their strengths, in terms of their weaknesses, in terms of what the fans are happy about and what the fans are clamoring for. And so it's almost like they're looking in the mirror into one another. And having said that, Ryan, I think now that we kind of take a step back, I think the loss puts things into perspective. A couple of things. One is I think the honeymoon period now with Lincoln Riley is officially over. His first year is done. And now I think year 2, there's really an expectation here. And he alluded to this in his post-game presser that we made a huge jump from 4-8 in year 1, and I'm expecting a similar jump in year 2. And translation there is it's got to be CFP or bust. And I think what the loss now feels like, there was a sense that USC was so far ahead of schedule in year 1, Ryan, and we were kind of expecting a 9-3 season. Hey, if they can win the bowl game, they'll cap off at 10-3. They end up finishing 11-3 after that 11-1 start. So now the season doesn't feel like as much of being ahead of schedule. They're just kind of right on schedule to where we thought Lincoln was going to be able to take this team in year 1 with his magic. And now I think moving forward, Ryan, the big question is, what do you do defensively? It's been a few days since that game and the way it ended. I'm still sort of stunned at how USC lost this game. All credit in the world goes to Tulane. I said this on Twitter. I think Willie Fritz is one of the 10 or 15 best coaches in college football. Tyjae Spears is an absolute beast. And Tulane is officially in the history books of college football, having the greatest turnaround from a wins perspective 1 year to the next ever. 2 wins to 12 wins, Ryan. It was just absolutely remarkable. But when you take a step back and look at the stats here, the fact that USC had the ball for 40 minutes compared to Tulane's 20 minutes, that USC didn't punt until 2.5 minutes left in this game, and the fact that Tulane scored 46 points on 8 completions the whole game, what that tells you is when they completed their passes, they went for a ton of yards. And Tyjae Spears, 17 carries, 205 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's a 12-yard per carry average. I mean, the defense was just non-existent. It was a matador defense out there. And the fact that we've gone a few days now without hearing anything about Alex Grinch, I said it in the post game. I think they should have moved on from Alex Grinch, but I don't think they will for a variety of power dynamics and I think loyalties that Lincoln Riley has to Alex Grinch. So I think Grinch is going to be the guy going into next year. I think he gets one final year to ride this ship. And I think now you have to really look into the transfer portal, as we've talked about, to get physical guys in that front seven on the interior and then athletic linebackers. And when you look at this defense and how bad it is, but the fact that you lose your best defensive player in Tul Tuipulotu and your best cover corner in Mekhi Blackmon. So not only is this defense atrocious, but now you lose guys that you have to replace. I think Lincoln Riley's whole focus in this offseason needs to be, how do we bolster this attack defensively to just be credible? Because you had the Heisman Trophy winner on your side, and to be able to walk away from this season without a Pac-12 championship, without a bowl victory, it does feel like an opportunity lost. We only have Caleb for one more year. Let's really give him an opportunity to play on the biggest stage. And the fact that his margin for error was so tiny and he was still able to take this team where he did just speaks to him being the best player in college football, but also speaks to all you need to do is some incremental changes here defensively to buy yourself an extra possession or two. And this team, because of Caleb Williams' greatness and the fact that Brendan Rice broke out in such a big way with 6 catches, 174 yards, 2 touchdowns, and just some incredible catches with his hands. And then you couple that with the Pac-12's leading receiver in Dorian Singer, and then you got the reinforcements like Taj Washington and Kyle Ford. This team isn't going to miss a beat offensively. It's just about getting this defense not even to average, because I think they're still going to be below average next year. It's just to get them, high enough in the band of below average where you buy yourself an extra possession or two, because that's the difference between 11-3 and 13-1.
Yeah. And that's, in college, it's much easier than the pros to kind of build a dynasty. I mean, look at Alabama, look at some of these schools, look at the 2000 SC years, obviously, because of recruiting. And as long as you're on the recruiting trail, especially now with the transfer portal, you don't have like a short window necessarily, depending on the program you are. Like USC should be able to have long windows. However, that being said, there's not going to be another Caleb Williams. I mean, Malachi Nelson is a great recruit out of Los Al, but he's still an unknown. I mean, he could be great. He could be as good as Caleb Williams, but we don't know that. Caleb Williams may end up going down as one of the greatest college quarterbacks ever. And we have 1 year left of him. You said it. And so the question, which I think all fans would resoundingly answer no, but as of right now, as of this point, Lincoln Riley is answering yes, is, does Alex Grinch do enough to have this 1 year window with Caleb Williams to go and get a national championship? And that is the question that has to be answered, that Lincoln Riley has to answer and say, yeah, I think he does enough for our defense to get us to that point. I just don't know how he says yes to that answer at this point. And obviously the loyalty, I respect the hell out of guys that are loyal. I'm a loyal human being to a fault sometimes. I get it. But you're making $12 million a year. You're on one of the best programs in football. And you've now had this DC for dating back to the Oklahoma days. What is this, 4 years or 5 years with them? And I think we've never seen a dominant defense with the Lincoln Riley led offense. And so I don't know what enough has been seen or shown or put out there that could have him saying, yeah, he does enough to give me and my offense enough to win a national title. But that's, I think, where we are.
It's sort of ridiculous to think about. I don't think Grinch gives you nowhere near enough, but I think, is this the first critique of Lincoln Riley? Lincoln Riley, this first 13 months, I compared him to sort of 2005 LeBron, when, first, second year, that he's so far ahead of the curve, and it's such a honeymoon period that you're not even allowed to criticize. And now have we found the first pimple on Miss America here to sort of be able to double click on? And is this a character flaw? Is this a judgment flaw of Lincoln Riley? Because, Ryan, we have to look at Lincoln Riley's body of work. He is 1-4 in CFP/New Year's Six games over the course of his career at blue bloods like Oklahoma and USC. Ryan, do you want to know who his 4 quarterbacks were in those 4 losses? It was Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, and Caleb Williams. You're talking about 3 Heisman winners and arguably the NFL MVP this year were his 4 quarterbacks in his 4 losses in CFP/New Year's 6 games. So what is that telling you? That he has had the best of the best at the quarterback position, that he is one of the 3 to 5 greatest offensive minds in college football and arguably maybe even football altogether. But that still has not been enough to be in the echelon of Alabama, of Clemson, of Georgia, and of LSU, because the defense has been that bad on the other side of the ball. And so Lincoln really needs to be able to take some stock here and say, I need to make some changes because I have had the best offensive talent that resources can get, brand can get, money can buy. And I still haven't really won a game of significance yet in my career, as great a coach as I am. And so that should be enough to say, let me really look at what my staff is. And Ryan, you hit the nail on the head with Caleb Williams. I don't know who the greatest quarterback in USC history is yet. I think that's still to be determined. You've got Leinart, you've got Carson Palmer, Caleb is in the mix. But what I will say is Caleb Williams has played the quarterback position better than any other USC quarterback in school history. And so even if Malachi Nelson is a 5-star, even if he is sort of the next guy to get the keys to the kingdom, there is no guarantee that the next guy is going to be close to Caleb Williams. And so you have a window here of 1 year really to maximize the greatness of this young man at the collegiate level, and you have to be able to go all in on it. And so I don't necessarily think of this as year 2 of a 10-year contract for Lincoln Riley. I think of this as year 2 of Caleb Williams, because just look at OU, Ryan. You talk about these windows. They don't last forever either. You went from Baker Mayfield to Kyler Murray to Jalen Hurts, and then you went to Spencer Rattler, and you thought Rattler was the same guy, and guess what? He wasn't. And that was the first sign of OU sort of veering off, and then obviously Caleb replaced him at OU. But, there's no guarantee that every link on the chain is going to be as good as the one before. And so nor is there any guarantee that Lincoln Riley is going to finish out his 10-year contract at USC, given his age, given his appeal in terms of NFL circles. So the window is there, but I think it's a little bit narrower than people realize. I think Lincoln needs to capitalize.
Yeah, absolutely have to. So I think we're probably in agreement that at this point on a Friday, almost, what is it now? Almost a week removed, that Grinch isn't going anywhere, right? Or do you think let's say this, to be fair, after in the press conference when asked about it, Coach Riley, which, most coaches say anyway, so it's not anything crazy, but basically said, I'm not going to answer that 15 minutes after we just played, but there will be a full deep dive into our entire program and changes will be made. So do you think there is still an outside shot that he decides to move on? Or are we enough days removed where it's like, this is the staff, maybe a position coach here and there might change, but at this point, coordinator wise, this is our 2 guys we're moving forward with going into spring ball?
Yeah, Ryan, it wouldn't stun me if he walked away from Grinch, but I'd be pretty surprised at this stage. We're 4 or 5 days removed now from the bowl game. There's been enough time for the emotion to wear off and to really look at things objectively, because you gain nothing by prolonging this decision. Remember, Lincoln Riley took the USC job from the OU job in less than 24 hours from the end of the Big 12 championship game. So when there's urgency to do something, it can happen in the order of hours. The fact that this has now gone on 5 days since the bowl game indicates to me that Grinch is coming back, and there's probably going to be a casualty on the position coaches. And I hate to say it, but I have a feeling Dante Williams is going to be the odd man out. And that's how quickly things change in this sport, Ryan. 15 months ago, Dante Williams was thought of as maybe a savior of USC football. And now Dante Williams is going to be on the unemployment line. Not for long, I don't think, because he's such a famed recruiter. He's always going to have a spot on a great team. But I have a sense that maybe Dante is the odd man out moving into next year. And I think, Ryan, it's going to be very interesting now. There's some pressure here now for Lincoln Riley, $100 million man. There's a window of opportunity here. And I think the other area that I'm interested to see what USC does a little bit is at running back, Ryan, because obviously losing Travis Dye, I'm not completely sold on Raleek Brown being an exceptional every down back. He's a lot slower than I thought he was going to be. I don't know if he's got quite that same burst that we thought he would. And I think there's a decision here with Austin Jones. He has one more year of eligibility. Does he come back? Or given that he's already played 4 or 5 years of college football, does he take his chances given that shelf life as an NFL running back is so small? So I think Austin Jones has a decision here to make that's going to be pretty fascinating. And if Austin Jones moves on, I think there's a little bit of a hole at running back that SC will need to fill in the transfer portal, and I'm sure they will do so very effectively.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because you see their counterpart in UCLA who, loses, in our opinion, the best back in football, but they had 2 very good ones still on the roster. And then they add 2 that we talked about in our UCLA segment in the transfer portal, 2 very good ones. And so in fact, the USC really hasn't yet. That is probably definitely an area, even if Austin Jones comes back, that they will need to at least add depth and versatility to. But yeah, because that's a position that obviously Caleb runs the show. Caleb's the guy. Caleb's the man. But when their running game was cooking, it made things a lot easier. And in that bowl game, the running game was not cooking. I mean, Austin Jones, 20 plus carries for 60 something yards. And, part of that, to their credit, you're missing some of your best offensive linemen. Now, the offensive line, I thought, protected very well, but it was not great in the run game. That's where we definitely saw the lack of Voorhees and Nealon and some of the other guys that weren't in there. So obviously that's a difference, but I think that you need to have different versatility from the running back position, which is something they'll definitely need to address here quickly, Jamal, because portal's open. Recruiting day already happened in December. We have obviously another recruiting day in February, which is less famed nowadays just because it all happens so much quicker. But yeah, I need to look through the list because I haven't really looked at any other backs in the portal at this point. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, Ryan. What's interesting, though, I want to double click a little bit on the assessment of the running game. Yes, you could tell outside of that 39-yard run for a touchdown by Raleek Brown, Austin Jones was under 3 yards a carry. And that was a combination of missing Voorhees and Nealon. But also, Ryan, I think it was a combination of an understanding that even though Caleb Williams was healthy enough to play, USC wasn't going to put him in too much harm's way on the RPO keeper. And I think Tulane was able to just zero in on the backs and really blow some plays up. And it just kind of goes to show you the value, again, of Caleb Williams. When this guy isn't 100%, SC is beatable every game out. And when you talk about valuable player this year, Caleb Williams was the reason that he took a 4-win team to a team that was threatening to go to the CFP because of his greatness. And if he's not 100%, this is a drastically different team, very deep at wide receiver, very deep at the skill positions, but an average offensive line now with some of these departures that they're going to need to replace, probably average at running back and now below average on defense. And when you couple that with their schedule, remember, USC did not have to play Washington this year. USC did not have to play Oregon this year. Those are 2 teams that are going to be on the schedule next year with a Michael Penix Jr., with a Bo Nix. And the team that USC gets to avoid next year, and I think very fortunately so, is Oregon State. I think DJ Uiagalelei, with those 5 offensive linemen coming back, with arguably now the best running back in the Pac-12 in Martinez after Charbonnet has left, you're talking about Oregon State, Oregon, and Washington being some incredible teams that are going to be threatening for this conference title. And depending on what happens with Cam Rising and now Jackson at running back, Utah is going to be in that mix. So this is going to be a real fight for the Pac-12 between those 4 or 5 teams next year. So SC doesn't quite get the schedule reprieve that they did this year. And I think the depth of teams that can potentially win this conference is even deeper next year than this year. So SC, I think, still has work to do in the transfer portal. Because if you ask me right now, just their roster right now today, if they had to step back out on the field in 2023, let's add Cobb, let's add Singer, let's add all the guys they've added up to this point. I don't think it's good enough to win the Pac-12. So there's work to be done here. from now until spring ball.
Yeah. And we've mentioned it before that Cobb transfer is a huge get and a great transfer at that. We have stuff up on him on LAFBnetwork.com. But quickly, Jamal, before we wrap up, because you mentioned it, I did pull up the opponents. Obviously, the dates are not up yet, but out of conference schedule, San Jose State, Nevada, Notre Dame. It's not a gauntlet. Notre Dame obviously will be good, but San Jose State, Nevada, both decent, Mountain West programs. And then you get Arizona State, which is going to be improved. Cal, we'll see about Cal. Colorado certainly will be improved from what they were last year. At Oregon, as you mentioned, Arizona is a team we've talked about all season as a team on the rise and could actually contend, we think, for the Pac next year. And then you get obviously the Stanford, UCLA rivalries, and then Utah and Washington. So definitely a much more difficult, and we'll see what happens from now till then, what these teams, but just based on, teams that will undoubtedly improve over 1 year to a next. You have a team like Washington, who is only a 2-loss team. Utah, obviously in the Rose Bowl. And then the teams that were at the bottom are certainly going to improve. Obviously, Colorado being the big one with all the news with, hiring Deion Sanders over there and all the transfers they're getting. I think they're second or third in the transfer portal. So obviously they're building that program up and going to try to have a USC type resurrection from, last year to this year. Maybe they'll challenge Tulane for the greatest win turnaround from 1 win to, if they go to 11 or 12, who knows? So, but with that being said, I don't know if you had something quick to add, but that is all the time we have, but go ahead quickly.
Yeah, Ryan. I mean, just quickly, I think at Oregon, at Washington, at Notre Dame, those jump off as really tough games on the road, and then home for Utah and UCLA. So there's 5 games next year out of the 12 where just at first glance, it's going to be very, very competitive. And so asking that team to go 4-1 and 5-0 in those 5 games, given roster construction right now, is a bit of a stretch. So work to be done and plenty to talk about in the offseason.
Yeah. And the positive, obviously you got to have the roster to do it. But the positive is there should be no issues with the resume being good enough to get them into the college football playoff because of those opponents. If they do their job and win, there should be no question they're top 4 at the end of the year. So that's all time we got for the Trojan Huddle on the LA Football Show. Got a quick break on radio. If you're on podcast, we'll be back next week with plenty more Trojans talk all off season long. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.